This bill you got going, death with dignity, and I know very little about this. So, what is it? Why is it a good idea? Why should your colleagues vote for it?
It's a very emotional subject, and the premise of it, Sam, is that a competent person ought to have control over his or her end of life, just as they've had control over medical decisions during their life. And it's really a libertarian ideal that we honor in all sorts of ways. You and only you have control over your medical treatment. And if your doctor says, Sam, I think you should have this operation, and if you don't have it, it's going to be bad for you, you have a right to refuse that treatment. So we really honor that. We don't honor it at end of life, though. And as a result, we see some terrible end-of-life suffering that everybody has experienced in their families in one way or another. So the premise of this bill is really simple. If a competent adult wants to, they can go to their physician and they can get an end-of-life prescription that they can use. That doesn't mean anybody. First of all, you have to be terminally ill, and that means your doctor has to say you've got less than 6 months to live. Secondly, you don't just go and get it. You have to go to your physician. You have to ask for it orally in person. At least 15 days later, you have to go back a second time and ask for it. At least a couple of days later, you have to go back and make a written request. And that has to be witnessed by people who have no dog in the hunt, so to speak. They can't be relatives. They can't be anybody who would benefit financially. The doctor has to consult with your primary care physician. If you're not the primary care physician, the doctor has to ensure competence, and if the doctor has any question, has to go and get a second opinion from a psychologist, and then and only then can the prescription be made, and the person himself or herself is the one who has to take that medication when the time comes. Can't be administered by anybody else. So that's the basic outline of the bill. There are those who object to it. There are many people who object to it. Some on religious grounds, and for those people who have serious religious objections, I honor that, and that's fine. Other people, though, are worried about the slippery slope, that it'll be used by people who really aren't competent, or it will be used because people feel they're a financial burden to their relatives and want to end their life, or it'll be disproportionately used for the disabled, or any number of other things that you or I think would legitimately worry about, and I worried about. But the good news is we've got a track record in other states on this. Oregon's had this very similar law for 19 years now. Vermont has it. A number of other states have it. And we have a history now of looking to other states and seeing how it's gone there. And the law works extremely well in Oregon. In all of these years, in 19 years, I think there have only been about 1,700 people who've even received the prescription. And interestingly, only about 1,150 of those have actually used it. And we wonder why that is. And it seems to be because it's just the comfort people have in having it as an option. And even if they don't use it, they know that it's available to them. And these horror stories about insurance companies denying coverage for care and greedy relatives getting people to take it, none of those things have panned out, and this has been really, really studied, particularly in Oregon. So it's a very emotional subject. We introduced it 2 years ago. It died by a single vote in the Senate. We brought it back again this year. We just had the public hearing on it, and I'm hopeful it's going to pass. We'll see.
Yeah. So, again, it is a rather somber subject, but your point is those bad scenarios haven't happened in the other states, and there's a lot of hoops you got to jump through if you want to do this with the competency and the waiting periods, and you got to 15 days, and you got to go back again.
A lot of hurdles. And a couple other things I mentioned is that no doctor ever has to participate in this if they don't want to. No pharmacist does, no hospital, no nursing home. This is totally voluntary on both sides. And it's interesting because the polling on this, both nationally and in the state of Maine, about almost 3/4 of people generally agree that people ought to have these options at the end of life. And we just did some polling in Maine here just very recently on that. It's something of it's interesting. It's something of a generational issue. And younger people seem to be more accepting of this than older people do. It's kind of, the analogy I'd make is the same-sex marriage. It's an idea you can see that it's coming. It's a question of whether we're quite there yet. Doctors have generally, historically, been opposed to this kind of legislation, but that's changing as younger doctors are coming into the workforce. The California Medical Association, the Hawaii Medical Association recently withdrew their opposition to it. The Maine Medical Association, as of right now, they're doing some more polling, but as of right now, they are neutral on it, whereas they used to be opposed to it as well.
Yeah.
So we'll see.